Good evening and welcome to ChildLink's Child Neglect discussion. Have you ever wondered about child neglect? This evening, with my panel, we will be discussing specific topics linked to child neglect. With me, on my right, I would like each individual panel to introduce themselves to us, beginning with Ms. Hope.
Yes, I am Maureen Hope,
Yes.
and I work with Orchid Foundation in collaboration with ChildLinK. I am a counselor, sensitizer, and a parenting officer with the organization.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Keen Chase, and I'm the program manager attached to ChildLinK.
Good evening, viewers. My name is Asani Tini. I'm the Communications Officer at ChildLinK.
Thank you, panel, and welcome to this very important discussion that we will have this evening. ChildLinK is the organization that is responsible for us being here today, and it has been in operation over 20 years, and that is something that is commendable. Why is it commendable? Because it focuses on the rights of children. Mr. Tini, I would like you to share some more on ChildLink's role when it comes to children's rights and their responses.
Okay, well, ChildLinK is a not-for-profit organization, and our vision is to create a Guyanese society where every child has the right to grow up in a safe and secure family and community. ChildLinK, we focus a lot of emphasis on collaborating
Yes.
because we believe that child protection is everybody's business. So ChildLinK works with stakeholders, whether it's in government or civil society or community-based organizations, faith-based organizations. We work with everyone to create a safe environment for children.
Okay.
We've been, as you mentioned, we've been in operation for over 20 years.
Yes.
We started in 1995,
Mm-hmm.
and we have implemented a number of projects aimed at fulfilling our vision, which is to protect children.
Yes.
And we've helped over 12,000 children. Our work has impacted the lives of over 12,000 children.
And in addition to that, I note that United Nations Convention, Guyana is a signatory on that, and that is also linked to ChildLinK. Ms. Chase, would you share with us your experiences at your organization as the program manager, as a young person dealing with all of the different people that will come across your path from time to time?
Okay, well, like Hassani would have mentioned, we've worked with over 12,000 children, or I
Yes.
should say we've impacted the lives of over 12,000 children in a variety of programs. So there isn't one particular program that we do at ChildLinK. Similar to what Hassani has said, we work with faith-based leaders, we work with community organizations, we work with civil society, and we work with the government on a range of topics. But one of the things that's cross-cutting in our work, it's what Ms. Hope would have mentioned. We do a lot of work as it relates to parenting.
Yes.
It is important for us not just to work with children in isolation of the rest of the family. So we do place a lot of emphasis as it relates to parenting. We do a lot of work in the school setting.
Yes.
The Ministry of Education has been one of our long-standing partners, as well as the Ministry of Social Protection, the Child Care and Protection Agency. We focus a lot on the psychosocial support
Okay.
of children and their families. One of the most important things for us and the work that we do is the prevention of violence and abuse.
Okay.
We know that violence and abuse continues to be, the scourge in our society. It is not talked about a lot, and we know that the government institutions can only do so much.
Yes.
And we feel as though at ChildLinK, it's one of our important roles in the Guyanese society to make sure that we partner with agencies to support families and children on a whole.
Okay. I know that the topic child neglect may not be something that persons are familiar with, and many persons may have questions. So I would like to ask Mr. Tini to give us a definition of what neglect is.
Okay.
Child neglect, being
Okay,
specific.
before I go into child neglect, let me just state that currently ChildLinK, we're working on the Child Rights Alliance. That's our current project. It is more than a project, it's more of an initiative where we're looking to bring everybody together. We're looking to create a national alliance of civil society organizations to protect children from violence and abuse. And we're looking to take a preventative approach.
Okay.
A lot of times, we know currently there's a lot of abuse in our society. And Guyanese, we tend to be reactionary, but the Child Rights Alliance, we're looking to prevent, looking to take preventative measures. Now, how we're doing that, we've been doing sensitization sessions in schools,
Yes.
and this is where Miss Hope
Yes.
falls in. We are going into the schools to sensitize children about their rights and responsibility, also what is child abuse,
Yes.
and how it can be prevented. And
To answer.
yes, as my colleague Keen would have mentioned, we're working with parents. We're going into the communities, and we're working with parents through parenting sessions
Yes.
to strengthen the relationship between parent and child, because sometimes that's where the abuse starts in the home. Parents may not be that familiar with what constitutes abuse, and they may not be even aware of what they're doing. So we just give them that knowledge, work with them, and to help strengthen that relationship. And
So, Sani, what is child neglect?
well, child neglect, again, back to the CRA, back to the CRA, we've been doing research,
Yes.
and we did two research, one on the experience of children in institutional care, and a most recent research that we completed is the Child Neglect in Guyana report. Now, coming out of that report, child neglect is defined as the consistent failure of a caregiver to provide for a child's basic need, the need for love, supervision, food, shelter, the need to ensure that the child gets medical treatment when needed, and also that the child goes to school consistently, provided that the caregiver has the wherewithal to do so.
Thank you, Mr. Tinney. That, I'm sure, will make it clearer for our audience, because many persons would not understand what constitutes child neglect. Ms. Hope,
Yeah.
would you share with us what are the types of child neglect?
Okay. It's noticeable that at times you will see a child very dirty. Not only the clothing, but the body, the person.
Yes.
It's not clean. Their hair is not well kept, dirty, begging on the street.
Yes.
Begging on the street. You know, they just need a love. They
Okay.
just need a love. Just need that. And so many other things could add into
Ms.
that.
Jace, I would like you to add to that
Yes.
what Ms. Hope just shared as it relates to what are the types of child neglect that children will face in Guyana society.
Well, similar to what Asani said in the definition. So we talked about
going to school.
supervision, we talked about economic withstanding. So basically we have economic neglect,
Yes.
we have educational neglect,
Mhm.
we have physical neglect, and one of the things that we don't speak a lot about is that of community neglect.
Okay.
So we need to understand there is not just one particular type of neglect. Unfortunately, as it relates to the child care and protection agencies, I think it's since 2013 to 2016, the Child Care and Protection Agency produces an annual report. And over 40%, 45% every year actually, for those past few years,
Yes.
child neglect comes out on top as the cases, the highest cases of reported abuse. But what we need to understand, like the definition would have said, it's not just one thing. So it could be that the child is being physically neglected, so they're being left alone while the parents are out working, or while
Yes.
the parents are out doing whatever. For whatever reason, they have no supervision. It could be educational neglect, where the parents choose not to send the child to school, or the caregivers.
Okay.
So it's a range of things, but what is the overall reasoning and why we will link it to neglect is where the child does not have a choice in it.
Okay.
So it's a purpose attempt of neglecting the child from one of their rights. Like you would have mentioned earlier, we have signed on to the UNCRC, and we do have the Rights of the Child Commission that's working with us. So it's one of those things where we have to recognize that as a signatory to that convention, we do have to put in place different aspects as it relates to recognizing and giving attention to the rights of children.
Okay.
Just to add to that, the research has, as Keen said, revealed that child neglect is the most prevalent form of child abuse. Between 2013 and 2016, there were 12,917 reported cases of child abuse, and 50% of those between that period we recognize have some component of child neglect in it. As Keen also mentioned, there's physical neglect, educational, emotional, and there's also medical neglect, where parents they have the capacity to ensure that the child gets certain vaccinations and certain medical treatment.
Yes.
However, they refuse to do so for whatever reasons. So yes, there are a number of different types of neglect, and there's also abandonment,
Yes.
where parents would leave children unsupervised. They may go migrate or so forth and leave the child without support. So
Yes.
that is also a very prevalent form of child neglect
Miss
occurring.
Hope, I know that you are on the ground. You're out in the fields and you have the experience linked to what both Miss Chase and Mr. Tinney they're sharing. Could you give us an example of what you're faced with when you go out in the street?
Okay, what I face with. I'm faced with children, as they have rightly said, being abandoned.
Yes.
Children not having the right to go to school, shelter, not living with their parents in their home, or even if they're with their parents, something has happened, they're being put out
Yes.
and they have to live with someone else. I know of a child who has been living at a friend's, the shed that they have there. He's been sleeping there, unknown to the child's, that I learned of recently, unknown to the child's, his friend's parents, right? And that is abandonment.
Yes.
And the mother never came to look to see where this child was. So you're faced with children begging on the streets, children stealing, and they have no other alternative but to do that. Not having the rights to go to school. One child said to me he wants to go to school, but then he doesn't have clothing to go to school, doesn't have shoes to go to school. And when he gets to school, his friends, because he's not clean, his friends, they will laugh at him and call him stink and all sorts of names.
And even as you share that, Mr. Tinney, I would like you to add what, because you identified some of the contributing factors that affect children. What else would you like to add to that?
Well, in our report, we found that finance
Yes.
is a major contributing factor to children being neglected. But I must add that I don't want the parents to feel that we're beating up on them. Child neglect only occurs when it's willful. If a parent doesn't have the financial resources to provide for a child's need, that doesn't mean they're neglectful. It's when the parent has the resources or the means and they choose not to. But in the report, we found that finance, a lot of parents, they can't afford to provide meal for their children. We have parents who can't afford to send their children to school. And we've also found out from the report that there are cases where a parent may have several children, and that parent has to make the choice to send one today, the other tomorrow, the other the next day. And what that results, or what that causes, is a cycle of poverty.
Yes.
Because the child can't get a proper education. When they become of age, they're not that marketable in the job market. So then they themselves can become can live in poverty, and then their children may suffer the same. So a cycle is created.
Ms. Chase, what is coming out this evening, it's eye-opening, because one of the key things that I read in the report that Ms. Paulette Henry did, she completed the research and it was presented in August 2017, and she stated that it was 3,842 reported cases of abuse and 2,038 cases were child neglect. So that tells us that it is indeed very prevalent, and it is something that we need to pay a lot of attention to. What I would like to ask you, Ms. Hope, is what would you say to an ordinary citizen that will help them to identify the signs of neglect, other than being dirty? Because it may be happening, like for example, the emotional neglect. What should persons look for so that they can help that child?
Okay. To help the child, and I should add this, that my colleagues said that parents might not be able, they financially, but I've experienced that, yes, parents have the money, but they chose not to spend it or use it for the child.
Wow.
Right? They chose not to do that. They chose to use it for other purposes, for their benefits. And the child is being neglected in that way.
So what would you say to someone so that they can see and know that something is wrong here and I need to call ChildLinK? I need to get them connected to someone. What are some of the signs?
Okay. I would say to someone who is out there and recognize this, there are several places you could call. Okay, ChildLinK's number.
Yes.
231-7174.
Okay.
The Child Protection Agency. Oh, I don't have the numbers right now in my head. You call the Child Protection Agency. You call the police.
Okay.
Or you report it to someone. It must be reported, because I feel that you are the watch for these children too.
Okay.
You are the watch for these children too. So call these numbers, report it. Many of the parents or persons are being aware now that there are counselors in the schools.
Yes.
Stop the counselors and tell the counselors.
Okay. Ms. Chase, I know that you have had some exposure linked to the training of officers, so that their dealing with children is much better than how it was happening before, and I would like you to just expand some more on that.
The Guyana Police Force, I must commend them. They've made tremendous efforts as it relates to working with the social service providers. Recently, the Guyana Police Force, they made available officers from the New Amsterdam, I should say the Region 5 and Region 6 district. I think it's B division, if I'm not mistaken. I think I have my division right. Okay. And so the B division officers, the recruits, we had community policing groups, we had community officers, neighborhood police officers too, who attended the training, basically to enhance their knowledge as it relates to child protection issues, you know, what they can look for, who are the contact persons in their immediate community. That's important because, you know, like Ms. Hope would have said, if you see something, who do you turn to? Many times the general public will say, well, you know, we don't want to go to the police station because they're not trustworthy. Okay, fair enough. But the police stations are the only place that you can turn to. You have the school's welfare. Like she said, many of the schools now, there's some person or some contact person in that school that is looking after social welfare. There is also social workers.
Yes.
They have the regional education officers. So the thing is that they are people. But as it relates to the police force, the Rights of the Child Commission has been going across the country doing training with these different divisions. And I must say, they're very receptive. And one of the things that personally stood out for me in the last training that we did, I won't call the division, but the police officer was saying, you know, we talk a lot about child neglect. We talk a lot about focusing and placing emphasis on children. And we expect police and other service providers to make sure that they do these things. But we have to understand that they have families also. And who is really looking out for them? Who is giving them support? Who is counseling them? So one of the things that's important, I just want the members of the public to understand that child neglect does not have a face. So you might say, oh, it's because they're poor, they're neglecting these children. But like Miss Hope would have said, one of the things that stood out for me in the report, there's actually a huge percentage of parents and caregivers who just don't care. So because they don't care, they neglect. So it's not necessarily because I don't have, like Asani would have said, not necessarily I don't have the means to take care of, but I choose not to.
Okay.
So we need to understand that, persons who are in position of delivering services for our protection and for our well-being, they also have family lives and they
Yes.
also go through different things. So with child neglect, one of the things I can say is that there isn't a face. So we do know that the police and the social workers are trying, but they also themselves, they will
Need
have
the
their own
support.
personal lives.
Mr. Tinney.
Just to piggyback on what would have been said earlier. One of the things, in terms of identifying child neglect, Ms. Hope had mentioned that we depend on persons. In the Child Rights Alliance, we depend on persons to see and recognize what is neglect so that we can know, so that we can render some form of assistance. We may notice that if you anybody can see something and identify a case of neglect. For example, a child may be seeking out attention a lot. That could be a sign of neglect. A child may not be performing that well at school. Consistently poor performance.
And attendance.
And attendance.
Okay.
And a child may not be coming to school with lunch.
Yes.
Things like that, a teacher or maybe somebody working in the school can observe, and then if you notice those signs, then you should just contact someone, make a report, so
Okay.
that child can get assistance.
And on that note, we will go to a break and return with additional discussions on child neglect. Please stay with us. Welcome back with us this evening as we continue to talk even more about child neglect. Mr. Tinney, you've been sharing information, and Ms. Chase and Ms. Hope linked to a report that we're extracting the information and we're sharing it this evening. But how can persons who would like to read this report for themselves, how can they find it?
Okay, it's the entire report. You can view it on ChildLink's website. That's www.childlinkgy.org. You click on the Child Rights Alliance tag. There'll be a drop down. You'll see CRA research papers. You go right there and you'll find the papers. The neglect paper and the one that we did previously, the experience of children in institutional care.
Thank you. We were talking about so many different areas, but I know that some parents and some of the other person's guardians, teachers, other persons who are exposed to children, they may like to know some more about the other forms of neglect. Ms. Chase, would you share some more?
So we spoke a bit on physical neglect, which is the common one.
Yes.
We also spoke a bit on the medical neglect. And I wanted to just add to the medical neglect. We have a culture here in Guyana where you fall down and you drink some sugar water,
Yes.
or just rub it, it's
Somebody
fine.
rub it.
And sometimes we need to understand that that can also link to a child in the long run being harmed.
Okay.
And it, again, it's not willing, but it's one of those things where we are trying to appeal to parents. Just don't take things, that easy and brush it aside.
Okay.
So, if a child is being bullied in school and they happen to be pushed off the step or whatever reason, you don't say, okay, did you bruise? You wipe off and you move on. Sometimes there are internal, and we would have seen this in the recent news.
Okay.
There can be internal injuries. So we're appealing to parents also to make sure that when it comes to medical, at least pay a little bit more attention and not have culture determine exactly everything that we're doing.
Yes.
I have no problem with culture, but it's just a matter of we have to also be cognizant of what is happening in our society.
So what you're saying is, for example, a father who will say to a son, you have to toughen up when something happens, and that child holds that in, and when he grows up and he's exposed to other environments, he himself will want to expose that person to what he was taught.
Well, that in a way is sorry, that in a way not necessarily medical, but we talk that's emotional.
Okay.
So we have the emotional neglect aspect also. So that is something I think also one of the things that we have to be keeping in the back of our minds. Love, attention. One of the things that Asani would have mentioned in the definition is that of support.
Yes.
So we do have a lot of parents who are sending children to school. I give you the money to go to school, I give you the lunch, but that's where I draw the line.
Okay.
So we know that studies would have shown that the love, attention, concern, affection, these are all important as it relates to really a holistic approach when we're raising a child.
But, this question, as we spoke before, and even as we're sharing this evening about child neglect, and you're talking about finances, where a person will send their child to school and they provide everything. But what can parents do? Where can they go so that they understand? Because as what would have been shared earlier, if you were taught that and you're older and you have children of your own, you continue that cycle. So how can we help parents who may not fully understand what is the difference between emotional neglect, financial neglect, medical neglect, so that they are knowledgeable and they can change the way that they do things?
Okay.
Miss Hope.
Okay. Now, especially in the boys, there's this tradition that you're not supposed to cry
Yes.
because you're a man, or daddy would not hug you because you're a man, right? We want the child to know that when we speak about emotional neglect, let the child know that he's loved.
How are we going to do that?
How are we going to do that?
Yes.
Spend time with the child.
Okay.
Daddy, it's not wrong for you to hug your son and say you love him. It's not something that is wrong. It's something that should be happening, because your son could learn from you how he would deal with his child. I have dealt with children that if you touch them, they cringe, and you ask them why, right? They will say, you're not supposed to hug me. Okay, I'm not doing a bad hug, a bad touch with you, but because daddy said I'm a man, I'm supposed to toughen up,
Okay.
right?
I know, Miss Chase, you would have shared, in addition to Mr. Tinney, that there is a group, or there are several groups where parents can
Yes.
meet. So
Yeah.
would you
I
add
think
some
that's
information?
why I was pushing Miss Hope to speak, because one of the things that she really does and has a
Parenting.
huge role and is very successful in the Region 3 area is that of parenting. So we do have parenting groups across the country.
Okay.
Unfortunately, not in all of the regions. But if you have an interest in attending a parenting training, please feel free to call us at ChildLinK, and we can see how we can link you to the closest location to where you're living or working. Because these groups really are influential in changing the lives of parents and families on a whole. And it really impacts the parents as it relates to how is it that they can better themselves, and what skills they
Yes.
didn't even know that they needed, or what skills they didn't even know that they had, that they can improve the lives of the child or children in their care.
Now,
And then you wanted to add.
yeah, we were talking about emotional neglect. and we did a previous study on the experience of children in institutional care. And this will tie into the need, a child's need for love and affection. Now, there were some children who were sexually abused. There were children who were physically abused, and they had to be separated from their parents and live in an institution.
Yes.
And what we found is that in spite of what was going on in the home, the child was longing to be back with the family in the home. That is how much children need the
Family
love of
time.
parents.
Parents,
They,
yeah.
it doesn't matter to them to an extent that they're not they're being abused in the home. They're being physically abused. There was one girl who was sexually abused, and she wanted to go back to the home because she said, you know, I don't want to grow up here. I would like to be with my family. I want my child to know her family. So parents, you need to understand that you may not be perfect, but your children need your love.
And I'm happy that Miss Hope is available and the other persons that will offer that training, that exposure, that additional information that will make a difference. Because when Miss Chase and I spoke, I, as a parent, learned something that I didn't even recognize, and that is the voice of your child. Because one of the things that you said earlier was that the child is saying to his father that, Daddy, you need to love me, you need to hug me. And it is not only from the parent side, but the children, because they're exposed to what is happening now, they can take that information home and help their parents and guardians and other persons who take care of them to fully understand what child neglect is.
We would have had a number of parents in the parenting skills session. I know I can speak especially about the parenting skills session in Georgetown that is conducted by Heavenly Light. I've seen some of the parents' reactions to the program, and some of them, they were in cases where there was domestic abuse. Some of them, they were being financially abused, and because of the support that they received and the information that was shared with them, they were able to overcome those situations, and they reported that yes, attending these sessions was beneficial to me. So it's not just about helping you with your child, it's about helping you, the parent, as well, to become a better, not just a better parent, but a better person.
Okay.
Yes, and if I could add, even in the Region 3 area, I can give a specific scenario of a young woman. She was just like 26. She has 2 children of her own, went into a relationship with, and she was so stressed out. And she didn't know how to deal with that situation because our partner was not there with her all the time. He was working away from home.
Okay.
And having to be, and even one of the child was sexually abused. So you could imagine what was happening there. She was extremely stressed out. And her situation was that she didn't know what to do. She was very abusive to the children.
Okay.
Because that's the way she knows to let out. She will beat them. She will curse them. And because of the parenting skills, today she's a different person. She had a behavior change towards her children, and I would still talk with her and these sorts of things, and she would say she's doing so much better. I will visit the home too, and she's doing so much better.
So
with
what
the
you're
children.
saying, Miss Hope, is that you have seen clear evidence.
Yes.
The difference being a
Yes.
part of the parenting session makes in the lives of not only the parent, but also the children.
Yes, yes. And even before I came here, I know this is a sensitive thing. I asked her if I can use her scenario, and she said it's okay.
Okay.
So she might be watching right now. She
Okay.
said it's okay. Yes.
Ms. Chase, what systems and policies need to be strengthened or implemented to protect our children from abuse? And this is a question that can go across to everyone. What are your thoughts on that? What systems and policies can be implemented?
Coming out of the report, like we would have mentioned, I think, quite a lot for the past few minutes, child neglect continues to be very high as it relates to being reported in the Child Protection Agency.
Okay.
One of the things we have to recognize is when we talk about reported cases, those are just the ones that we know. And we know that for every one reported cases, more than likely there are two reported cases that has been unreported. So it's important for us to understand that these numbers, in its true sense, can be much more staggering than it already is. Unfortunately, it's approximately 50% for the past 5 years. And so the Child Care and Protection Agency, one of the recommendations that came out of the report was the increase in staff. That is why when Hassani would have mentioned the Child Rights Alliance, we are really hoping to work together in collaboration with other agencies. We know that it's not always feasible to just employ more persons and train more persons, but we know that there is already the manpower to some extent out there doing this work, but we have to do it in a collaborative way. So we know that as it is, some regions it's about one officer to about 5,000 children, 500 children, sorry, and that cannot work. One of the things that when it comes to social work and counseling and really giving that adequate support, we try to limit the numbers to an extent where it's manageable for the children to receive adequate support and the families, and so to make sure that the social worker or the counselor, whoever is working with that particular target group, not be burnt out. So one of the recommendations is that if there are persons out there who have an interest and they know it all, to work in child neglect, how we can come together and support the already taxed Child Care and Protection Agency. And this goes across the board for schools welfare officers also. Some regions there's one school welfare officer to about 100 schools, 50 schools. One school is about 500 children.
So record keeping definitely affected in that
yes.
way. Okay, Mr. Tini?
Okay. I think also you're looking at systems or so that can be strengthened. I think what we need more of is community involvement. As we would have mentioned, child neglect is where the parent may not have the wherewithal. I mean, the child's need isn't being met, but because the parent don't have the resources and the wherewithal. So one of the things that we need is that's community spirit. Remember back in the day, your neighbor looked out for you. If you're playing on the road, if you're going somewhere, they would want to know, where are you going? What are you doing here? We don't really have that much. So it still takes a village to raise a child, and we need persons to look out. Now, there are some cases where we've seen in the news, you had this gentleman who went to work one night, left his children at home, and then his teenage brother came, and the child, his daughter died as a result. Now, neighbors that know this man's situation, he's not a bad parent, he's a good, hard-working parent. But here's where that community spirit comes in. You know that these children, they're there alone. As a neighbor, you can step in. I'm not targeting the man's neighbor, but I'm just trying to bring out the point that community involvement, community support, we can help each other out. Not all cases of neglect are willful, so where you know that you can lend a helping hand, do so.
Yes, I know one of the things that really is coming out from the promotion of the findings of this research, that we do have a lot of persons who are coming out to say, we've been doing this and we just want to make sure that we're doing the right thing and we're not getting ourselves in trouble. I know we had a call-in recently of a very good neighbor who she is looking after two of the children. She's feeding them religiously every day. And when the mother is at work, she makes sure that she checks in on them with another neighbor. They take turns in checking in on these two children. And like Asani would have said, it's not a bad mother. It's just circumstances would have allowed for this situation to be where it is. But what we want persons listening to recognize is that you can do your part. It's very easy for some families, for you to do your part, sometimes it just requires you making a phone call. You know, your mother said you had homework. Did you finish your homework? You know, okay, is everything all right? Because we did have a tragic case a few years back where we had a mother who went out to work, and the place they had electricity was cut, and the child light a candle, and the house burned down. Fortunately, the children survived, but you know, that's a situation
Yes.
where a neighbor could have played an integral role in just basically looking over, making sure the children aren't playing with fire. You know, if it is that they have to wait with her or at their house for a few hours. We're not saying we're asking everybody to open their homes and that sort of thing, but just think of small ways that you can do to alleviate neglect happening maybe in just your street.
And on that note, we will go to our second break and return with Mr. Tinney's bursting comment linked to what he needs to add to Ms. Chase. Thank you for staying with us this evening as we continue to discuss child neglect. Mr. Tinney, could you share what I didn't allow you to share before we went to break?
Okay, one of the things that we need to put in place is a more collaborative, unified effort, especially among civil society organizations. Um, Government agencies can't do it alone. The Child Care and Protection Agency can't do it alone. Uh, we need to help each other. Um, Organizations, well, ChildLinK, through the Child Rights Alliance, we're in the community a lot. So when we're talking to the children or we're talking to the parents, we're seeing cases that the government agencies may not see. So we have to now report that and work with them to give the children the assistance that they need. So basically, civil society, we need to realize that it's not ChildLinK against versus another organization. We all have the same goal,
Collaboration.
so we have to work together and work with the agencies that are mandated by law, work together so that we can help children.
The question I need to ask, you mentioned just now that the data, it is submitted to someone or information is submitted to ChildLinK. Where does the data, let's say for example, persons in region 3, they want to send cases linked to what is happening, linked to child neglect. This information is sent to ChildLinK. Where is it sent?
We need to understand ChildLinK is a NGO.
Good.
We are not government based, so it's a
Based.
non-governmental organization. So the Child Care and Protection Agency under the Ministry of Social Protection still has the mandate as it relates to the children of Guyana. So any sort of reported cases of abuse goes directly either to the Child Care and Protection Agency, the Guyana Police Force, or the school's welfare department.
Okay.
But overall, the Child Care and Protection Agency is the place that we can, that this report, the source of data came from.
Okay. So just so that all of our viewers clearly understand that tomorrow no one is going to show up at your office with information to say, well, I've observed this, I've
They
noticed
can.
this.
No, no, no,
can,
no, no.
they
We
can.
don't turn anyone
No,
away.
okay,
That's
can.
important for people to
Yes.
know that
They
we
can.
don't turn you away. We do give out our numbers. You can call us. You can visit us on
Okay.
Facebook, or you can drop in if you have the time. But we are not the organization that will keep that case, and we will not work on that case unless it is because we do collaborate closely with the Child Care and Protection Agency, unless it is that they say, oh, this is something that we would like you to follow up on, we wouldn't have an issue with that, because we do have counselors and parenting officers and sensitization officers in the regions that are working closely as it relates to child protection. So it's not something that we don't turn people away, but we do make necessary referrals, because there's only so much we also can do.
Okay, well, that is very clear. And you mentioned regions, and I would like to ask the question, which region would you say is most affected with child neglect?
Well,
All right. Well, the centralized regions, region 4, I think region 5, that's where, according to the report, you'll get the most reported cases. But that doesn't mean that child neglect isn't happening in the other regions. What is happening is maybe it could be the case where in region 3, 4, and 5, the more centralized regions, that's where the public awareness is going out. That's where the facilities are there, so persons know, well, I can contact here, I can contact CP, I can contact ChildLinK, I can contact Orchid organization. So they're more prone to report. But in the other outlying areas, there may be a lot of cases of neglect, other cases of abuse, but it's just that persons may not be aware. In fact, today I was sharing with Keen, someone from a hinterland region contacted me on Facebook to find out, okay, this is happening in my home, what can I do? So I had to let them know, well, in your region, there's this facility at this place, so you need to go there. So, yeah, child neglect, it's prevalent, it's across all 10 regions, but it's just because things are so centralized in region 4 and so forth, you'll get the most reported cases here.
Okay. Well, that in itself makes very clear, because I remember listening to an ad on television, and it was linked to a parent observing something that was happening, and one person said, I'm minding my own business, I'm not interested in that. And one of the key things that we're aware of is that social media is out there. So even if you're in the hinterland area, persons have access to Facebook. So it means that you have the opportunity, and the other organizations have the opportunity to share more information as much as possible. So even if they don't have a direct person, they have the connection.
And what the Child Rights Alliance, what we're hoping to do, one of our objectives is that we get working groups in all 10 regions. So right now we're working in 7 of the 10 regions. So we're hoping, by the end of next year, that we can have a stable person or stable groups within all 10 administrative regions, so that in instances, for like the example that Asani would have just shared, we can readily, not that we didn't, we did, but if it is that it's in a region that we're not working in right now, we can readily make a referral.
Ms. Hope, your thoughts? You were saying that region 3, that is a region that you're aware that it is affected. Would you say that there are more boys than girls, or is it even between the two?
I think it's more boys.
Okay.
More boys, because the boys they would be the most on the road. They would be the most stealing, the most begging, the boys.
Okay.
Yeah, in fact, the report supports that 52% of the cases of child neglect are boys. Especially, well, in general, the age range is 8 to 13. Children 8 to 13, they're more likely to be neglected. And then you have children 0 to 3, and then children 4 to 7. But what we found is that the majority of child neglect cases are boys.
Okay. I remember reading in the research paper that was presented that Miss Anne Green said in her cover letter that a change in behavior and attitude of all will help the prevention of abuse and neglect. And that reinforces what you're saying, linked to the collaboration with the other NGOs, the police, and every other person. And what I would like to ask, each person, for you to look into the camera and encourage whomever it is that is looking at us right now, that they should do something, they should connect with an organization so that we change what is happening when it comes to our children. And we can see the example of that young lady that you spoke about happening much more, and the numbers are reduced. So, Mr. Tinney?
Well, one of the things that I like to tell folks is that protecting children is a matter of national development. Now, why is that so? It pays when we neglect children, if the state and the civil society neglect children, those children may grow into persons who may develop negative behaviors. Now, when that happens, and if, let's say, they get involved in crime, now the police has to investigate. That comes at a cost. Maybe support services need to get involved. That comes at a cost. Now, if we invest a little time, a little resources into ensuring that the children are protected and that all their needs are catered for, when we do that, then they have the opportunity to develop their full potential, and they can contribute. They can contribute to society. So it's a matter of national importance.
Thank you, Mr. Tinney. We are counting down to the final few minutes. So, Ms.
Maybe
Chase.
I'll just say 2 words: be vigilant. And I think one of the things for me that I always try to push in all of my training and every time I'm doing public awareness is for persons to recognize that we do have a 24-hour hotline here in Guyana, and to utilize it, 227-0979. We all have cell phones. It would be very, very good if at least every other person has this number in their phone. So if you see something and it's whatever hour of the day, you can make a call.
Okay.
Ms. Hope?
I would like to say to the communities, we've been into the communities and we have done some sensitization. And we would be contacting those we have sensitized to have the parenting groups. And we're asking you to cooperate. It's important for your children, important for you, because I know that there were several women and even men who have reported about abuse in different forms. So it will be good for you. And so when we call you, we're asking you to cooperate.
Okay. And before we conclude this session, could you please remind us of the access to that research paper that was completed, where it can be located, and the telephone number at ChildLinK?
Okay, our telephone number is 231-7174, 231-7174. You can get the research paper on www.childlinkgy.org. Click on the Child Rights Alliance button, and you have access to the full report.
Facebook.
You can also get the information on Facebook. But one of the things I want to remind the viewers is we have a roundtable discussion on Wednesday at the National Library Conference Room, Wednesday at 5 in the evening, from 5 to 7. So we're encouraging members of the public to come and support, and you'll also have the opportunity to share your concerns as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tinney, Ms. Chase, Ms. Hope, for sharing all of the information. And I know that we more than likely may need about 5 hours to provide additional information, but the key is the report is accessible. ChildLinK is available. Ms. Hope, her Orchid's organization, is available if you need additional help, support, and information. So I would like to thank our viewers for staying with us this evening. And remember what Mr. Tinney said, that it takes a village to raise a child, and do your bit to make a difference in the lives of others. Have a wonderful evening. This is the panel, and we had a wonderful time with you. Thank you very much.